Our home? It stopped being ours the day you celebrated my absence.
Barbara? List Maple Street. Now.
When I collapsed at work, the doctors called my son. He never came, but my daughter-in-law did something else. She posted a family photo. The caption beneath it sliced sharper than any diagnosis. Finally, a day without the drama queen. Family dinner is so much more peaceful. Number blessed. That was the moment I decided. I picked up the phone and made one call. I sold something they thought was already theirs. Who's dramatic now? The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor buzzed like furious insects above me as I lay on the gurney, scrolling through social media to distract myself from the ache in my chest. Heart palpitations, the doctor had explained, stress-induced. At 63, my body had finally rebelled, tired of pretending everything was fine. A notification flashed across my phone as a nurse checked my IV line. Melissa had tagged me in a post. For a brief second, hope flickered. Perhaps she had written something kind, a prayer, or at least a "get well soon." I tapped the screen and saw the truth instead. The photo showed David, my son, grinning at the head of the dining table that once belonged to me and Tom. Melissa sat glowing in the chair I had always occupied, while 12-year-old Chloe laughed at something out of frame. My family, inside my house, well, technically theirs now, as they liked to claim, enjoying a meal that looked elaborate and warm. The caption beneath it mocked me. Finally, a day without the drama queen. Family dinner is so much more peaceful. 47 likes already, and even my sister-in-law Nancy had added laughing emojis. My heart clenched tighter. While I lay alone in an emergency room bed, they were celebrating my absence. Not concerned, not worried, celebrating. The nurse handed me my discharge papers with a sympathetic smile. "Your son is coming to pick you up, right?" I glanced again at the timestamp on Melissa's post 20 minutes earlier, the same time the hospital had called David. He knew exactly where I was. He had chosen dinner instead. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "I'll call a taxi." As I waited in the hospital lobby, my hands trembling less with fear and more with resolve, I dialed a number I had buried for years. "Barbara, it's Eleanor Hartwell. Remember that house on Maple Street you once said would sell in a week? I'm ready to list it. 3 years ago, I thought I was being the perfect mother. In truth, I was the perfect fool. Like most betrayals, mine began with love disguised as concern and ended with me discovering exactly how little I mattered to the people I had given everything to. After Tom's funeral, the house felt hollow without him. He had left me everything: the house, his life insurance, enough savings to live securely. I was 60, widowed, and unbearably alone. Then David came, almost every day, sometimes with Melissa and Chloe. They brought groceries, offered comfort, sat with me. One evening on the porch, David said, "Mom, you shouldn't be rattling around in this big house all by yourself. It's not healthy." Melissa's sympathetic nod had sealed it. All those memories everywhere. It must be so hard. Their words felt like love, and when David suggested moving in temporarily, it sounded perfect. Chloe could stay in her school district, and I wouldn't be alone. Melissa reassured me, just until we save enough for our own place, a year at most. Within 6 months, they had moved in completely. I rented a 1-bedroom across town, paying monthly rent, while they lived mortgage-free in the home Tom and I had spent decades building. What I didn't know then was that they had been planning it all along. Quietly, they redirected my mail to Maple Street bank statements, credit card offers, investment notices, all screened by them before I could see anything. Just temporary stretched into 2 years, then 3. Every time I suggested they move out, a new crisis appeared. David's unstable job, Melissa's supposed pregnancy, Chloe's struggles with middle school. I began to feel like an intruder in my own home. My belongings vanished into storage. The wallpaper Tom and I had chosen together was painted over. It wasn't just the house I lost, it was my presence in their lives. I had become invisible. When Barbara arrived the next morning, she brought Patricia Morgan, an attorney with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. At my small kitchen table, Patricia spread out documents. Eleanor, was there any formal lease? Any rent payments? I shook my head. Number, it was just family helping family. Patricia exchanged a look with Barbara. That's good and bad. Good, because you still hold full ownership rights. Bad, because after 3 years, they may try to claim tenant protections, even adverse possession. My stomach turned. What does that mean? It means, Patricia said firmly, we have to be very careful. They may fight this. Then Barbara opened a thick folder. There's something else. I checked the tax records. Several liens were filed and released in the past 18 months. Did you know? My blood ran cold. What kind of liens? Home improvement loans, Barbara said. All documented and paid off, but it means someone borrowed heavily against the property's equity. The room spun. I never authorized any loans. Patricia leaned in. When did you last check your credit report? I don't remember. Maybe 2 years ago. She nodded grimly. We need to pull it immediately. If they've been intercepting your mail, there could be accounts in your name you know nothing about. As Patricia made the calls, I sat frozen, realizing how naive I had been. What I thought was generosity had been them quietly taking everything. When she hung up, her expression was grave. Eleanor, we'll need to meet again tomorrow. There are several accounts showing activity at your old address that need urgent investigation. Barbara began to pack up her folder. Honey, selling the house might just be the least of your problems. The next morning the phone rang at 7:23 a.m. David's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail as I brewed myself coffee, the good kind I hadn't allowed in years without feeling guilty. His voice filled the recording. Mom, we need to talk. Some crazy woman called saying the house is listed. Obviously there's been a mistake. Call me back immediately. A mistake. The idea that I could act without his permission was incomprehensible to him. The phone rang again. Melissa. This time. I answered. Good morning, Melissa. Her voice was sharp. Eleanor, what the hell is going on? Some real estate agent called David saying she's our listing agent now. This has to be a scam. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the silence before answering. Actually, Barbara Henderson is my listing agent. She's been in business 30 years. I wouldn't call that a scam. Melissa's voice climbed, strained. Your listing agent? What are you talking about? You don't own the house anymore. We've been living here for 3 years. I steadied my voice. Living there, yes. Owning it, no. The deed has always been in my name. The silence on the other end was different now. Heavy, jagged. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head. But we've been maintaining it. We've put money into improvements. We painted Chloe's room, with paint I paid for. I interrupted. Along with the new washing machine, the roof repair, and every utility bill for 3 years. All mine. That's when I heard David's voice bursting through the speaker, angry and desperate. And in that moment, after 3 years of silence, I finally felt the balance of power return to me. Apparently, I was on speakerphone now. Mom, this is insane. You can't just sell our home out from under us. Our home? That phrase hit like a physical slap. It stopped being our home when you started, celebrating my absence on social media. What are you talking about? Melissa's voice again, but I could hear the guilt underneath the confusion. Finally, a day without the drama queen. Ring any bells? Posted while I was in the emergency room yesterday. By the way, but don't worry, I saw the photo. You all looked very happy to be rid of me. The line went quiet. In the background, I could hear Chloe asking someone to help her find her math homework. When David finally spoke, his voice had lost its indignant edge. Mom, that post wasn't about you. Of course it wasn't. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate precision, just like all those times you've been too busy to return my calls weren't about me either. Just like forgetting my birthday last month wasn't about me. I didn't forget your birthday. You wished me happy birthday on Facebook 2 days late, which is about the level of effort I've come to expect. But here's what really bothered me. Patricia's credit. Report findings from yesterday were far worse than I'd let on. While they'd been playing house with my property, they'd also been playing bank with my identity. David, I said carefully, we need to have a very serious conversation about finances in person today. His voice became wary. What kind of conversation? the kind where you explain the $75,000 home equity loan taken out in my name 6 months ago. After hanging up on David and Melissa, I did something I should have done years ago. I started making a list. Not a grocery list or a to-do list, but an accounting. Every dismissed phone call, every canceled dinner plan, every time I'd been made to feel like an inconvenience in their perfectly curated family life. The notebook filled up faster than I expected. February 2024. Asked David to help move furniture in my apartment. He said he was busy with work, but posted photos from a weekend. Ski trip the same day. January 2024. Invited to Chloe's school play. Melissa forgot to save me a seat. I stood in the back while strangers sat in empty chairs. December 2023. Christmas morning. At their house. I brought gifts for everyone. They gave me a scented candle from the drugstore clearance rack. Still, I had the markdown sticker on it. But it was the things I found online that really opened my eyes. While going through 3 years of social media posts, something I'd never bothered to do before, I discovered a pattern that made my stomach turn. Melissa's Instagram was like a highlight reel of family happiness. Hundreds of photos of David and Chloe, family vacations I'd never heard about, dinner parties I'd never been invited to, birthday celebrations where I was conspicuously absent. But the comments were what really got to me. Under a photo of them at some restaurant. "Where's David's mom?" asked a family friend. Melissa's response, "Oh, she's not really a social person anymore. Prefers to stay home." Under a Christmas morning photo. Lovely family. "Just the 3 of you." Melissa again, David's mother, is going through some things. We're giving her space to figure herself out. Going through some things. Figuring myself out, like I was having some kind of breakdown instead of just being systematically excluded from their lives. But the worst one was under a photo from Chloe's 12th birthday party last month. A party I'd known nothing about until I saw the pictures online. Someone asked, "Did Grandma Eleanor make it?" David had responded this time, "Mom's gotten really demanding lately," about attention and involvement. We decided it was better to keep things small and stress-free for Chloe's sake. Demanding about attention and involvement in my granddaughter's birthday party. I stared at that comment for a full 10 minutes, letting the words rearrange everything I thought I knew about the past 3 years. They hadn't been protecting me from an empty house. They'd been protecting themselves from me. I wasn't the grieving widow who needed space and support. I was the inconvenient obligation they had to manage. Every dismissed invitation I'd blamed on my own neediness. Every awkward family gathering where I felt out of place. That wasn't in my head. They'd been actively working to make me feel unwelcome in my own family, but Patricia's findings from the credit report were still haunting me. The home equity loan was just the beginning. There were credit cards I'd never opened, personal loans I'd never signed for, and purchase patterns that painted a picture of people living far beyond any means I was providing them. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Mom, can we please talk about this reasonably? We're family. Family doesn't sell houses out from under each other." I typed back, "You're absolutely right. Family doesn't." Then I blocked his number and called Patricia to discuss filing. Criminal charges. The revelation that shattered everything came at 2:47 a.m. when I couldn't sleep and decided to follow Patricia's advice about monitoring my financial accounts online. What I found made the heart palpitations from 2 days ago feel like a gentle flutter. The home equity loan was Tisha Wu, Ling Meiwen, not the small improvement loan I'd been imagining, but that was nothing compared to the rest. 3 credit cards I'd never opened, each with limits between $15,000 and $20,000. A personal loan for $30,000 that I definitely hadn't signed for. Store cards, gas cards, even a jewelry store credit account. All of them showing my address as the house on Maple Street. All of them current and in good standing, with payments being made from an account linked to that address. An account I'd never opened. The phone number listed on every single account was David's cell phone. With shaking hands, I pulled up the detailed statements I could access online. The charges painted a picture of a lifestyle I'd unknowingly been funding for over 18 months. Melissa's yoga studio membership, $200 monthly. David's gym and personal trainer, $350 monthly. Chloe's private tennis lessons, $400 monthly. Lessons she'd never mentioned taking. Restaurants I'd never heard of, thousands of dollars monthly. Designer, clothing purchases, spa treatments, weekend getaways. And then I found the vacation charges from December 2023. $8,000 to a resort in Mexico charged while I'd spent Christmas alone because they were keeping things low-key that year. But it was the most recent charge that made me physically sick. A jewelry store purchase for $3,200 made the day I was in the hospital while I was lying on a gurney with chest pains. David had been buying jewelry. The paper trail showed they'd been systematically stealing my identity for 18 months, but the mail redirection had been going on for 3 years since right after Tom's funeral, when they'd helped me by having important documents sent to their address so I wouldn't be overwhelmed by paperwork while grieving. Every bank statement, every credit card offer, every financial communication had been intercepted and screened. They'd been curating what I saw while living off fraudulent accounts opened in my name. I printed everything, every statement, every charge, every forged signature that somehow passed for mine. By 5 a.m., I had a folder thick enough to choke a horse, all documenting how my son and daughter-in-law had been systematically stealing from me while making me feel grateful for their attention. But there was something else in the credit report that made my blood run cold. Inquiries, multiple inquiries, from attorneys' offices, financial institutions, and something called elder care assessment services. They hadn't just been stealing from me. They'd been building a case. Barbara arrived at 8 a.m. sharp with coffee and Patricia. Morgan. Eleanor, Barbara said, taking one look at my face. What did you find? I handed Patricia the folder. Apparently, I've been funding their lifestyle for 18 months without knowing it. But there's more. Patricia flipped through the documents with the efficiency of someone who'd seen this before. Identity theft, credit fraud, forgery. Eleanor, this is criminal. But these inquiry patterns suggest something else entirely. What kind of something else? They've been consulting with elder law attorneys and financial advisors. This looks like preparation for a conservatorship case. The room started spinning. They were planning to have me declared incompetent. The timeline suggests, yes, the mail, redirection, the financial fraud, the social isolation. It's a textbook pattern for financial elder abuse, leading to guardianship proceedings. Barbara nodded grimly. The house sale just became a lot more urgent, honey. But even more urgent is filing criminal charges. If we don't move fast, they might accelerate their timeline. My phone had been buzzing all morning. David calling from different numbers since I'd blocked him. Melissa texting. Increasingly frantic messages. But I wasn't their victim anymore, and I definitely wasn't their meal ticket. I looked at both women. How fast can we get the house listed and get criminal charges filed? Patricia smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. How does today sound for the charges and tomorrow for the listing? They escalated faster than I expected. By noon, Chloe was standing at my apartment door, tears streaming down her face, holding a suitcase. Grandma Eleanor, please don't make us homeless. Mom says we'll have to live in our car. My heart shattered. Using my 2-year-old granddaughter as an emotional weapon was a new low, even for them. Sweetheart, come inside. I guided her to my small couch, noting how her parents had stayed in the car, close enough to coach her, far enough away to maintain plausible deniability. They sent you here alone? I asked gently. Chloe nodded, fresh tears spilling. Mom packed my bag and said I should stay with you since you're making us move out. She said maybe if I talked to you, you'd remember that family is supposed to take care of each other. The manipulation was so blatant it was almost insulting. Almost. Chloe, honey, did your parents explain why I'm selling the house? She shook her head. They just said you changed your mind about letting us live there. That you don't want us to be happy anymore? I sat down beside her, choosing my words carefully. Do you remember 3 years ago when Grandpa Tom died and your family moved into our house? Yeah, to take care of it while you figured out what you wanted to do. That's right. It was supposed to be temporary. But what if I told you that in all this time your parents never once looked for their own place? Never saved money to move out. Instead, they've been using my name to borrow money for things like vacations and expensive purchases that you never got to enjoy. Chloe's face scrunched in confusion. But Dad said we couldn't afford our own house because his job doesn't pay enough. Then, maybe they shouldn't have spent $8,000 on a trip to Mexico last Christmas. Her eyes widened. We didn't go to Mexico. My blood ran cold. What did you do for Christmas, sweetheart? I stayed with my friend Sarah's family for a week. Mom and Dad said they had to go help sick relatives, but they couldn't take me because I might catch something. They'd abandoned their 2-year-old daughter with friends while they vacationed in Mexico on stolen money. These weren't just thieves. They were neglectful parents. A car horn honked outside. David signaled that the performance should prop look round, a pastons, be wrapping up. Chloe, you're not going to be homeless, I promise you that. But I can't let your parents keep using my name to borrow money for things that don't benefit you at all. They're using your name? Her voice was very small. I'm afraid so. But that's not your fault. And I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. The car horn honked again, more insistently. I walked Chloe downstairs, holding her small hand in mine. David rolled down the window as we approached. Well, did you talk sense into her, Chloe? I leaned down to window level. David, if you ever use your daughter as a manipulation tool against me again, I'll add child endangerment to the criminal charges I filed this morning. His face went white. What criminal charges? Identity theft? Credit fraud? Forgery. The $108,000 you've stolen from me over the past 18 months using fraudulent accounts. Melissa leaned across from the passenger seat. We haven't stolen anything. That money went to household expenses and family needs. Family needs? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Like the tennis lessons Chloe doesn't take, the vacation Chloe didn't go on, the jewelry you bought while I was in the hospital. You're being dramatic, Melissa snapped. This is what family does. They support each other. You're absolutely right, I said. That's exactly what family does. They support each other. They don't abandon each other in hospitals. They don't celebrate each other's absence. And they definitely don't steal each other's identities to fund luxury lifestyles while abandoning their own daughter at Christmas. I opened the car's back door. Chloe, you're coming with me. Your parents need to figure out how to be actual adults before they're fit to take care of anyone. 3 weeks later, Patricia, Morgan's office felt like a war room. Legal documents covered every surface, and she'd assembled what looked like a small army of associates to handle the multiple cases we were now pursuing. The good news, she said, adjusting her reading glasses, is that your son and daughter-in-law left a paper trail that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. The bad news is that this level of systematic fraud suggests they've been planning this for much longer than we initially thought. I was sitting across from her with Chloe, who'd insisted on coming to understand what her parents had done. At 12, she was handling the truth better than her. Father had at 38. The pattern goes back almost 4 years, Patricia continued. The mail redirection started immediately after your husband's funeral, ostensibly to help you manage paperwork while grieving. The fraudulent accounts began 18 months ago, but the groundwork was laid much earlier. The calculation of it made my stomach turn. They'd used my grief as cover for a long-term theft operation. There's something else, Patricia added, sliding a document across the desk. I had my investigator do some digging into their history. This isn't their first time pulling something like this. The background check revealed a pattern that explained so much. Before moving in with me, David and Melissa had lived with his elderly Aunt Margaret for 2 years. She died unexpectedly at 84, leaving her house to a church instead of to David. After her death, the church's attorneys found significant financial irregularities in Margaret's accounts, money that had disappeared in the months before her death. They never proved anything conclusively, Patricia explained. Margaret had been showing early signs of dementia, so the family decided not to pursue criminal charges. But the pattern is unmistakable. Chloe looked up from the coloring book I'd brought her. Is that why we moved in with you so fast after Grandpa died? Because they couldn't live with Aunt Margaret anymore? Smart kid. Too smart for her own good, but smart enough to see patterns the adults had missed. I think so, sweetheart. But here's what's most concerning, Patricia continued. The inquiry pattern on your credit report shows they were preparing for the next phase, multiple consultations with elder law attorneys specializing in guardianship proceedings. They were building a case to have you declared incompetent. My phone rang. Nancy, my sister-in-law, returning a call I'd made earlier. Eleanor, I was so relieved to hear from you. I've been worried sick ever since I heard about the criminal charges. Is it true what David's been telling people? What has David been telling people? NY's voice became uncomfortable. He's saying you've had some kind of breakdown, that you're making false accusations against him and Melissa, out of grief and confusion. He says you've become paranoid and that's why they were trying to help you get professional care. There it was, the narrative they'd been preparing. Any accusations I made would be dismissed as the confused ramblings of a grieving, possibly incompetent widow. Nancy, I need you to know that everything I've discovered is documented and verified. Bank records, forged signatures, fraudulent accounts. This isn't confusion or grief. This is criminal financial abuse. I believe you, honey. And Eleanor, I'm sorry I didn't speak up before when I noticed things that seemed wrong. What kind of things? The way they talked about you at family gatherings. How they made you seem like a burden they were heroically managing. How they intercepted calls meant for you, saying you were too fragile to handle family business. After hanging up, I looked at Patricia. They've been preparing this narrative for months, haven't they? Classic pattern. Isolate the victim, control the narrative, then swoop in as the concerned family members who need legal authority to protect someone who's clearly become incompetent. She handed me another document. Emergency custody hearing is scheduled for tomorrow. Given the evidence of child abandonment and financial crimes, I'm confident we'll get temporary custody of Chloe. I looked at my granddaughter, who was listening to everything with the serious expression of someone much older than, "Sure, Grandma Eleanor," she said quietly. "I don't want to go back there, not until they stop lying about everything." 6 weeks after filing charges, the house sale finally closed. Barbara had found cash buyers who paid asking price after a brief bidding war. Apparently, houses with motivated sellers moved fast when priced correctly. Standing in the empty living room for the last time, I felt a strange mix of sadness and liberation. This house held 35 years of memories with Tom, but the past 3 years had tainted those memories with manipulation and theft. Chloe wandered through the empty rooms, running her fingers along walls where her height had been marked, at different ages. "It's weird seeing it empty," she said. "Everything looks different without furniture and lies." "Filling it up," I replied, which made her smile despite herself. The buyers, a young couple with twin toddlers, had been charmed by the house's family history and solid construction. They had no idea they were buying evidence in multiple felony cases. Barbara handed me the cashier's check with a satisfied smile. $400,000 minus closing costs. Not bad for a motivated sale. It felt surreal holding a check that represented my freedom. Not just financial freedom, but freedom from the web of manipulation that had trapped me for 3 years. My phone buzzed, constantly with updates from Patricia. The district attorney's office was treating this as a significant elder abuse case, partly because the dollar amount was so high, and partly because the systematic nature of the fraud suggested a pattern that might extend to other victims. But the most interesting development came from an unexpected source. The detective assigned to my case had discovered something troubling in David and Melissa's financial records. Mrs. Hartwell, Detective Rodriguez had called to explain. We found evidence that your son and daughter-in-law were researching your husband's death extensively. Medical records, insurance payouts, estate documentation. They were mapping your entire financial situation within weeks of the funeral. The calculation was chilling. While I was grieving, they'd been planning. There's something else. We found draft documents on their home computer, a conservatorship petition dated 8 months ago. They were planning to file it next month. Right. Around the time you would have been most isolated and appeared most confused to outside observers. What stopped them? You did. By fighting back. Instead of accepting their narrative, you disrupted their timeline. Now, instead of looking like a concerned family seeking help for an incompetent relative, they look like criminals caught in the act. That evening, Chloe and I sat on the small balcony of my apartment, watching the sunset and eating takeout Chinese food, something that would have required a family committee discussion in her parents' house. Grandma Eleanor, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Are my parents going to jail? I considered how to answer honestly without traumatizing her further. They're going to face consequences for what they did. What kind of consequences depends partly on whether they take responsibility or keep lying about it. She nodded solemnly. I hope they learn something from this. Me, too, honey. Me too. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Melissa. We need to talk. There are things about this situation you don't understand. I showed the text to Chloe, who read it and rolled her eyes with the worldliness of someone who'd heard too many manipulative explanations in her short life. Are you going to call her back? What do you think I should do? Chloe thought for a moment. I think people who steal money and lie about it don't get to demand conversations. 12 years old and already wiser than her parents. The revelation that changed everything came from the most unexpected source, Jennifer Wells, Melissa's estranged sister from Seattle. She called me on a Tuesday evening, 3 months after the criminal charges were filed. I almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Hartwell, this is Jennifer, Melissa's sister. Please don't hang up. I saw the news articles about the charges, and I need to tell you something important. I'd met Jennifer maybe twice in all the years David and Melissa had been together. She lived in Seattle, and it wasn't close to her family, but there was an urgency in her voice that made me listen. What is it, Jennifer? I called. Melissa last week trying to understand what had happened. I thought maybe there was some misunderstanding, some way this could all be resolved within the family. I braced myself for another guilt trip or plea for mercy, but Mrs. Hartwell, during that conversation, Melissa said things that made me realize this wasn't a misunderstanding at all. She told me details about their plan that I don't think she meant to share. My blood went cold. What kind of plan? Jennifer's... The voice was shaking now. She was angry, not thinking clearly, and she said something about how you'd forced their hand by fighting back, that they'd been planning to wait longer before starting the guardianship process, but your dramatic behavior had made them move too quickly. She admitted to planning guardianship proceedings. More than that, she said they'd been consulting with attorneys for months about how to document your supposed mental decline. She mentioned having recordings of you sounding confused during phone calls, photos of you looking disheveled at family events, testimony from neighbors about your erratic behavior. The systematic nature of it made me feel physically sick. Jennifer, why are you telling me this? There was a long pause. Because 15 years ago, Melissa did something very similar to our grandmother. My heart stopped. Grandma. Rose was 82, living independently, completely sharp mentally, but she had dot of men, money, about 200,000-inch savings plus her house. Melissa moved in to help her after a minor fall. Within a year, Grandma was in a nursing home with dementia, and Melissa had power of attorney over everything. What happened to the money? Gone, all of it. Melissa claimed it went to medical expenses and care costs, but the numbers never added up. When Grandma died 2 years later, there was nothing left. The family was too grief-stricken and guilty to investigate thoroughly. Jennifer's voice broke. I should have warned you years ago. I should have said something when I heard David had married her, but I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Jennifer, would you be willing to provide a sworn statement about your grandmother's situation? Absolutely. And Mrs. Hartwell, there's something else. I kept some of Grandma's papers after she died. Financial records that didn't make sense at the time. I think they might be relevant to your case. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about a predator who'd found the perfect hunting ground. Elderly family members who trusted their planed out relatives and didn't expect to be systematically destroyed by the people who claimed to love them. I called Patricia immediately. Patricia, we need to expand the investigation. This wasn't David and Melissa's first victim. What I had once thought was only a personal story of betrayal and theft within my family revealed itself to be something darker, something systemic. A pattern of elder abuse that had already destroyed at least 2 lives, and it might have continued unchecked if I hadn't chosen, finally, to fight back, instead of quietly accepting my assigned role as victim. Some battles are about money, some are about justice, and some you fight because if you don't, others will be swallowed whole by the same cruelty. For me, this battle became all 3. 18 months later, I sit on the deck of my new house in Asheville, North Carolina. The air smells of pine, the mountains steady on the horizon. From where I rest, I watch Chloe, my granddaughter, hammering planks onto the beginnings of a treehouse with my neighbor's grandson. Their laughter floats like music across the yard, a sound that feels like healing. The criminal proceedings finally ended last month. David stood in court and pled guilty to identity theft, fraud, and elder abuse. 2 years in prison, full restitution of $127,000. Every fraudulent account investigators uncovered, every shadowy transaction led back to him. Melissa escaped prison, but not accountability. 18 months of community service. Her lawyer argued she had only followed David's lead. But when Jennifer testified about how their grandmother had been targeted too, that defense sounded hollow, almost laughable. Because yes, my case opened the door. Investigators traced money flowing from my Aunt Margaret's estate straight into David and Melissa's accounts in the months before she died. Nearly $80,000 stolen. Justice delayed, yes, but not denied. Restitution was slow, almost agonizing. It meant auctioning off their luxury purchases, garnishing David's wages from prison work, even placing liens on any future property they might try to own. I recovered about 60% of what they stole. Patricia, my lawyer, told me that was better than most victims ever get back, but the money was never the true victory. The sweetest justice was watching their carefully crafted narrative collapse under the weight of truth. For years they whispered to relatives that I was slipping, that I was dramatic, incompetent, incapable of managing my own affairs. And then they were forced to watch me stand tall in court, navigate legal procedures, real estate contracts, and criminal prosecutions with clarity and resolve. You don't do those things if your mind is gone. Chloe lives with me permanently now. The custody hearings reveal details that still make my chest ache, how David and Melissa had left her with friends and relatives on at least 6 separate occasions, including a Mexico vacation and weekend getaways funded by fraudulent credit cards. The judge was not impressed. Parents who chose luxury trips over their own daughter's well-being were stripped of their illusions of parenthood. Chloe is thriving here. A new school, new friends, and most importantly, adults who don't use her as a pawn in their games. She's in therapy. So am I. Together, we are learning how to build honest relationships after years of surviving deception. The house Tom's life insurance bought us has 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and enough land for Chloe to run barefoot, to climb trees, to have the childhood she deserves. She has friends now whose parents welcome me with kindness instead of treating me like an unwanted obligation. I volunteer at the Regional Elder Abuse Prevention Center, teaching others to recognize the warning signs of financial exploitation. Too many of the stories sound like mine. Too many begin with love and trust, and end with betrayal by family members who twist affection into an opportunity for theft. People often ask if I regret how it all unfolded, if I wish I had handled it differently. The answer is simple. I regret that it took me 3 years to see the truth. I regret that I allowed their temporary arrangement to stretch into years, that I mistook manipulation for care. But I do not regret fighting back. I do not regret refusing to wear the labels they gave me: dramatic, demanding, incompetent. I do not regret protecting Chloe from parents who valued vacations and vanity over her stability and love. What I have now is something I thought I'd lost forever: peace. Not the fragile, false peace that comes from silence and avoidance, but the real kind. Peace without apology. Peace built on the knowledge that I chose to fight, that I refused to be anyone's victim. David still calls sometimes, from prison. He asks for commissary money, for help with appeals, or to persuade Chloe to answer his calls. I keep the conversations short and civil, but I do not pretend. Some trust, once broken by betrayal, can never be rebuilt. As I sit here writing this, Chloe calls me from her treehouse. She's nailed a small sign above the doorway. It reads, "Eleanor and Chloe's Clubhouse. No drama queens allowed." Smart girl. She has already learned the truth that took me decades to uncover. The people who call you dramatic are usually the ones creating all the drama. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you have a story, share it in the comments, because your voice matters.